Sign the sale papers to Julian's trust today, or the government takes the house on Friday. My stepmother, Elena, slammed a final notice of seizure onto the coffee table before I could even take off my funeral coat. She pointed to a complete stranger standing by the window. Meet Julian. He is your father's secret son, and he is the only cash buyer willing to pay off the debt instantly to save the family name. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. I picked up the tax notice. My hands did not shake. Panic is a luxury I could not afford, not when dealing with a predator like Elena. As a forensic genealogist, I spend my life staring at government documents, birth certificates, and census records. I know what official paper feels like. I know the specific, heavy weight of bureaucratic authority. And this piece of paper felt wrong. The texture was standard printer paper, too light, too smooth. The font was just a hair too modern, an Arial derivative instead of the standard government serif used in tax liens 3 years ago. It was subtle, the kind of thing 99% of grieving daughters would miss in a crisis. But to me, it screamed forgery. This was not a financial tragedy. It was a manufactured crisis designed to force a rush sale before I could look at the books. But I did not say that. If I exposed her right then, she would pivot. She would claim I was being cold, that I cared more about technicalities than my father's final wish to care for his son. She would use my logic as proof of my heartlessness. So I played the role she had written for me. I let my shoulders slump. I let my voice tremble just enough to sound broken. I looked up at her, tears welling in my eyes but not falling. I asked why Dad did not tell me about this debt. Elena sighed, a sound that was perfectly rehearsed. She told me he was too proud, that he made her promise to hide it to protect his dignity. It was a moral ransom. She was holding my father's memory hostage to explain away the fraud. I took a shaky breath. I told her I could not do this today. I begged for 1 week. Just 1 week to say goodbye to the house and pack my things. Then I would sign whatever she wanted. I saw the triumph flash in her eyes, sharp and hungry. She thought the fake tax threat had terrified me into submission. She thought she had won. Fine, she said, her smile tight. 1 week, but not a day more. I walked out of that room with my head down, looking defeated. But the moment the heavy oak doors closed behind me, my mind switched gears. I was not grieving anymore. I was auditing. That night, the estate was suffocatingly quiet. I walked the halls alone, the floorboards creaking under my feet in a rhythm I had known since I was a toddler. The silence was heavy, filled with the ghosts of a life Elena was desperate to evict. I stopped at the doorframe of the nursery. The paint was chipping slightly near the bottom, but the history was still there. I ran my fingers over the notches carved into the wood. My father had marked my height there every birthday until I left for college. Small, jagged horizontal lines with dates written in his sprawling, messy handwriting. Celeste, age 5. Celeste, age 10. Celeste, age 18. Those scratches were the only physical proof left that I had once been a child here, that I had been loved before Elena arrived. To anyone else, this house was just an asset, a pile of bricks and land worth $3.5 million. But to me, it was a museum. It was an archive. It was the only place on earth that still held the memory of my biological mother. Elena did not just want to sell a house. She wanted to liquidate a legacy. She wanted to turn these memories into cold, hard cash to fund a new life with her secret son. She wanted to sand down these doorframes, paint over the marks, and erase the proof that I had ever existed in this family. The realization hit me harder than the grief. This was not just theft. It was revisionist history. I stood in the dark hallway, my hand still covering the mark from my 10th birthday, and I made a vow to the house itself. I am not fighting for assets. I am fighting against the erasure of my father's legacy. And I will not let them take you. I bypassed my father's study. Elena would have sanitized that room first, shredding anything incriminating. Instead, I went up to the attic. It was hot, dusty, and filled with the kind of detritus people forget they own. This was where the real history lived. I spent hours digging through boxes of tax returns from the 90s, ignoring the spiders and the heat. I was looking for a pattern, an anomaly, anything that did not fit the narrative. And then, I found it. A crumb. It was a box of canceled personal checks from 1995. My father was meticulous with his records. I flipped through them until I saw a series of checks written to a specific hospital in a remote rural county. The memo line read simply, "Medical expenses, Elena." This was impossible. Elena claimed she had not met my father until 2005. Why was he paying her medical bills 10 years earlier? And why in a county 3 hours away? As I dug deeper into the correspondence box next to it, I found the answer to a question that had haunted me for years. Why did Dad stop calling? I found letters from his old accountant, unopened. Letters from his friends, intercepted. And draft letters from him to me, complaining that I never reached out. The triangulation trap. I sat on the dusty floor, realizing the scope of her operation. Elena had not just stolen his money. She had stolen his reality. She had intercepted his mail, filtered his calls, and fed him a steady diet of lies that everyone had abandoned him but her. She had created a world where she was his only savior, making him dependent on her for everything. Even the truth. That is how she got him to sign those checks. She did not just forge his name. She forged his consent. I took a picture of the 1995 checks. Then I used my professional credentials to access the Vital Records database. I ordered a rush copy of any birth records from that remote county for that specific year. While I waited for the records, I turned my attention to the immediate threat. The tax lien. I called the county assessor's office directly. The woman on the phone sounded bored until I gave her the parcel number. She confirmed that the property taxes on the estate were paid in full. There was no lien. There was no seizure notice. I thanked her and hung up, a cold smile touching my lips. The notice was a complete forgery. Next, I traced the Heritage Restoration LLC that my father had supposedly paid $1.2 million to over the last 5 years. Elena claimed it was for essential repairs to the foundation and roof. But looking around, I saw peeling paint and water stains. No work had been done. I pulled the public business filings for the LLC. The registered agent was not a contractor. It was Julian. The address was a post office box in a strip mall. It was not child support. It was not renovation. It was embezzlement. Pure and simple. For 5 years, Elena had been draining my father's accounts, funneling the money to her son through fake invoices for work that never happened, and she had convinced my father to sign the checks. The courier arrived 2 days later, with a certified envelope. My hands felt cold as I opened it. It was the long-form birth certificate from that rural county. I scanned the document, my eyes landing on the names. Mother: Elena Vance. Father: unknown. Date of birth: November 12, 1995. The name on the certificate was not Julian. It was a different name. But the date matched perfectly with the checks. Julian was not Charles's son. He was Elena's son from a teenage pregnancy she had hidden from everyone. She had not brought him home to connect with his father. She had brought him home to steal the last of the money. The DNA test she had flashed at the funeral was a prop. The story about my father's dying wish was a lie. This was not an inheritance dispute anymore. This was grand larceny and fraud. I compiled the dossier. The birth certificate, the fake tax lien, the LLC filings, the canceled checks. I put them all in a neat stack. The trap was set. The week was up. Elena wasted no time. She hosted a lavish memorial gala at the estate. She called it a tribute to my father. But everyone in the room knew what it really was. A victory lap. A signing ceremony. The curved driveway was filled with luxury cars. Lawyers, business partners, and the cash buyer, a tech mogul associate of Julian's, were all there, circling like sharks in tuxedos. The champagne was flowing, and the air smelled of expensive lilies and anticipation. Elena stood on a raised platform in the ballroom, looking every inch the grieving but noble widow. She gave a tearful speech about saving the family honor, about making hard choices to pay off my father's secret debts. The crowd ate it up. Then, she gestured to me. She announced that I would sign the deed transfer, honoring my father's final request to care for his son. She held out the pen and the microphone. The room went silent. All eyes were on me. I stepped up onto the platform. I took the microphone in one hand and the heavy fountain pen in the other. I looked at the crowd, then at the buyer, and finally at Elena. Her eyes were hard, daring me to make a scene. I told her I was ready to sign, my voice amplified and steady. But since there is no will, I explained, the title insurance company requires us to clear the heirship legally. I pulled a document from my blazer pocket. It was a standard affidavit of heirship. I placed it on the podium next to the deed. I turned to Elena and Julian. I told them they must swear under penalty of perjury that Julian is Charles's biological son to receive the proceeds. It is just a formality to satisfy the insurers. The notary I had hired nodded from the side. Elena hesitated for a fraction of a second. She looked at Julian, then at the crowd, then at the buyer waiting with the check for $3.5 million. Greed is a powerful blinder. She picked up the pen. She signed. Then she handed it to Julian. He signed with a flourish. The notary stamped it with a heavy, decisive thud. The trap snapped shut. They had just committed a felony on public record. As soon as the notary's stamp hit the paper, I signaled the AV technician. The image on the massive projector screen behind us changed. The tribute photo of my father vanished. In its place, a high-definition scan of a document appeared. It was the long-form birth certificate. The name Elena Vance glowed in high definition next to the word mother. The father field was blank. The date of birth was 1995. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Then the slide changed again. The real tax records, showing a zero balance. Then the fake invoices from Heritage Restoration LLC displayed side by side with Julian's business filing. I turned back to the microphone. "You did not find a son, Elena," I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs like a scalpel. "You hired your own child to rob my father." I dissected the fraud calmly, point by point. The fake renovations, the forged tax lien, the years of embezzlement. I watched the color drain from her face. She looked like she was aging 10 years in 10 seconds. She tried to grab the microphone, but I stepped back. "You wanted a legacy," I said to the silent room. "Here it is." The police, who had been waiting in the wings for the signal of perjury, stepped forward. The handcuffs clicked on Elena's wrists first. Then they took Julian. Megan, my stepsister, stood frozen in the crowd, watching her future evaporate. The guests were silent, horrified. This was not a gala anymore. It was a crime scene. The sirens faded into the distance. The last of the guests and the fraudulent buyer had fled, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. I stood alone in the center of the ballroom, then turned and walked to my father's study. The house was quiet. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, shutting out the chaos of the world. I poured a glass of his favorite red wine. I sat in his leather chair, the material still creaking the way I remembered from childhood. For the first time in months, the air in the house did not feel heavy. The estate was safe. The history was preserved. The toxic branch had been pruned. Elena was facing 10 years for fraud, embezzlement, and perjury. Julian was in custody. And Megan? My stepsister stood in the driveway as the police cars pulled away, bankrupt and humiliated, realizing her free ride had just hit a brick wall. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like justice. I looked around the room, at the books, the old maps, the family portraits that Elena had tried to sell off. I was not lonely. I was surrounded by the people who actually mattered. I was not just a daughter anymore. I was the curator of my own life. I raised the glass to the empty room, catching my reflection in the dark window. "To truth," I whispered, "and to the house that keeps it. If you have ever had to stand alone to protect what matters, tell me your story in the comments. You are the keeper of your own truth." Wow. Take a deep breath. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are probably asking, why did she wait a whole week? Why did she even pretend to go along with it? Why didn't she just throw them out the moment she saw that fake tax letter? It is easy to judge when you are on the outside looking in. But let's break down the psychology of what just happened. Because Celeste wasn't being weak. She was breaking an addiction. In psychology, we call this the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. Think about how a slot machine works. You pull the lever, and most of the time, you lose. But every once in a while, it gives you a few coins. Just enough to keep you sitting there, pulling that lever, hoping for the jackpot. That is exactly what toxic families do. Elena didn't abuse Celeste 24/7. She probably gave her tiny crumbs of hope, a smile here, a family dinner there, just enough to keep Celeste chasing the dream of a happy family. Celeste wasn't stupid for staying. She was conditioned to wait for a payout of love that was never going to come. But here is where the story flips. And here is the street-smart lesson you need to take away today. Celeste stopped playing their game and started playing financial defense. Did you catch her first smart move? It wasn't screaming. It was the audit strategy. Scammers and manipulators rely on emotional chaos. They want you to panic so you don't look at the details. Elena slammed that tax notice down to scare Celeste. But Celeste looked at the paper texture. She checked the font. She called the county assessor. The moment you stop reacting and start auditing, you take the power back. Scammers hate details because details are where the truth lives. Then, she moved to building the case. Notice she didn't confront Elena immediately with the fake tax letter. If she had, Elena would have just made up another lie. Instead, Celeste went to the attic. She found the 1995 checks. She got the birth certificate. She built a dossier so thick that no amount of gaslighting could burn through it. She gathered her receipts in silence so she could make noise when it mattered. And finally, the masterstroke. The affidavit trap. This is the ultimate financial self-defense move. Celeste knew they were greedy. She knew they would sign anything to get that $3.5 million. So, she used their greed to handcuff them. She forced them to swear under penalty of perjury. She didn't just catch them in a lie. She let them commit a felony on public record. She didn't argue with them. She let the law do the heavy lifting. So, what is the verdict? You are the curator of your own life. Just like Celeste said, you do not need to wait for an apology that will never come. You do not need to buy your way out of a toxic relationship. If you feel like something is wrong, if the tax notice feels fake or the family loyalty feels expensive, trust your gut. Audit the relationship. Check the receipts. And if you have to, let the toxic branch prune itself. If this story resonated with you, or if you have ever had to audit your own life to find the truth, hit that subscribe button. We are building a community of survivors here. Until next time, stay smart and keep your receipts.